Welcome to Real Estate Focus. Our topic is home inspection. My guest is Bill Sutton. Bill is the president of Bay Colony Home Inspection. And he is here today to share with us about home inspection. In a normal real estate transaction, when the property has gone under agreement, the buyer will contact the home inspector to perform home inspection. And that's when the inspector come into place. Welcome, Bill.
Welcome. Thank you for having
being
me.
here. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And glad you can make it. So with that being said, the first question is, why should either a homeowner or a home buyer perform home inspection?
Okay, excellent starting question.
Thank you.
Both might consider a home inspection. Certainly the buyer, it's imperative, in my opinion, to get a home inspection because the buyer's investing hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases millions of dollars. And to protect that investment, for his due diligence, it would be very prudent for him to get a home inspection. For someone to look at the structural, mechanical, electrical systems, drainage, grading, roofing, those kinds of things that are critical to his investment. So it's important for the home buyer to get a home inspection, and it's important for that home buyer to be at the inspection too as well, to see what goes on there, what the inspector can inspect, and what he doesn't inspect as well, and see the problems firsthand. In terms of a seller, a number of sellers do get home inspections, either because they have some concerns about their property. They may not be selling the property, but they have concerns, or they want to know if the property is in good condition because they might be putting it on the market. So in our case, our company does what we call maintenance consults. We go there for an hour, do a walkthrough. It's a relatively reasonable fee to do that inspection, much lower than a typical home inspection. It's not the full written report, but we basically cover the same material and would review that with the home buyer, a walkthrough through the home buyer. So in that case, the buyer could be prepared, the seller could be prepared, if he is putting it on the market, what major problems he might have and might want to correct them before he puts it on the market. Or he might just want to know, even if he's not selling it, does he have major problems? In some cases, things that affect life safety for the occupants there, his family.
Right. So it's always good to be prepared and expect what problems will arise if the buyer were to perform home inspection themselves. So, and it's worthwhile to invest a little bit, if you will, to have a home inspector like yourself to basically look through the property and see if there are any major issues in and around the property. So it's always a good idea. So.
Without doubt, Ralph Nader, who used to be the primo of the consumer advocates, had spoken to our home inspection conferences, and he said it was the best investment a consumer could ever buy. For $500 or $600 to get a professional to look at that property is a great value.
Yeah, I agree. So, in terms of hiring a home inspector, where should a general consumer or home buyer, even a home seller, to look for? Where should they find a licensed home inspector?
Okay, and that's an excellent question and critical to the process. First and foremost, you want to try to get someone with lots of experience. Myself, I've been in the business for 35 years, inspected approximately 10,000 houses and commercial properties. But more important than the number of inspections and the experience is you want to get someone that's going to be thorough and ethical. There are potential conflicts of interest. That holds true for the real estate business as well. So we always caution people that you want to be careful where you get your recommendation from. Ideally, if you have a friend or a relative who had a home inspection and been satisfied with, that might be a good source for home inspection. If you have a buyer's broker that you have confidence in, certainly you could look for them. There's a list you can go online and look at the state regulations, licensing commission. They give you a list of all the home inspectors either by name, inspector number, which would be meaningless, or by town. But it's not critical that you get an inspector that's in that town. That's not. Some people think it is important. So most thing is someone that's going to be thorough, someone that's experienced, and someone that's going to be very
honest.
ethical
Right,
on there.
right.
In addition to being licensed in this state, many states do require licensing. Massachusetts is one of them. I would also recommend, I'm a member of the American Society of Home Inspectors and Independent Inspectors of North America. Those are two great associations. The American Society of Home Inspectors is the oldest and largest professional association for inspectors. They have education standards and other standards that exceed the state. So I would suggest you might want to look at ASHE is the acronym for it, American Society of .org, ASHENewEngland.org. Go onto that website, and they have a select an inspector, put in the area code, zip code, area code, I guess, of the town you're buying in, and they'll produce a list of that, inspectors. Independent Inspectors of North America is another good source for independent ethical home inspectors that would do the same thing. So in addition to being licensed, you might want to get someone that's really into the education, that spends a lot more time than the state would require.
Right, that's important, and basically that speaks a lot in terms of experiences, professional knowledge, and also ethical as well. So that's important. And now during the inspection, what should the buyer look for in terms of the condition of the property, or I don't know, major issues with the property? What should they look for? What should they pay attention to?
Sure. A lot of what a home inspector does, he's professional, he's trained, and he's going to know all the technical stuff. That's what you're hiring for. But interesting enough, a lot of what we do is common sense in taking the time to look at that property. Most of the major problems we're going to see are going to be in the exterior of the house, looking at that house, foundations, exterior walls, roofing, gutters, looking for belling, bowing, big cracks, those kinds of issues. And in the basement, with all the mechanical, electrical systems, hopefully visible. Finished basement's a little tougher to look at that kind of stuff. So most of the time the home inspector is going to spend is going to be outside the property in the basement. I may spend a minute or so in a room, other than the kitchen and bathroom, several minutes. So the interior where you're taken around with the agent to see the curb appeal of it is not near as important to the inspector and should not be as near as important to the buyer. You want to make sure the bones are solid.
Right.
So you want to just spend some time looking at the outside, looking at all the systems in the basement, and if something looks funny or bad, probably is. And you can know, instead of wasting your time spending home inspection, if you see a lot of questionable or serious issues, maybe you pass on that property. So looking and taking the time to look at the things that normally they wouldn't look at, just the kitchen or the bathroom or the painted walls and windows, painted walls and ceilings, etc.
Right. It's just like wearing makeups, right? Yeah. So.
Yeah, cosmetics are.
So, is there such thing called failed inspection?
No.
No. Okay.
Not by any standards.
Okay.
The inspection is not for a pass-or-fail process. It's an education process. Primarily, we're representing the buyers.
Right.
We do some sellers and some people that
Right.
just own homes. But primarily, 99% of our business is through buyers of property.
Right.
We never fail. It's illegal in the state to fail or pass a property. There's no
It's
such
good to
thing.
know, actually. Yeah.
And we're not there to meet code compliance because some of these houses were built well before the code. You
That's
get a house
right.
that's 100
That's
years
right.
old or older, there were no codes
Right.
around at that time.
Right.
So an inspection is not a code compliance inspection. It's not there to tell you what things cost, what caused problems, what cured problems. All go beyond the home inspector. The home inspector is there as the generalist, and I like to compare it to, in terms of medicine, an internist, who if he's taking your heart, blood pressure, sees there a problem, he'd send you to a specialist. The same way we would. If we saw some very serious structural issues, we'd recommend an engineer, heating issues, plumbing issues, electrical issues, the same. Not that we wouldn't know what we observed.
Right. Right.
So,
Okay. So those are the major stuff that a buyer should pay attention to. And in terms of inspections, what kinds of inspections to perform when appropriate? And these questions has to do with termites, septic tank, and some other stuff that we're gonna talk about based on a graphic that we're gonna have on the screen. So, if you will, please explain briefly what the graphic shows and yeah. So just that's the first picture.
yeah, so that shows termite damage on a floor, a finished floor. some area. Although the average person might not know that to be termite damage. And just by looking at that, I wouldn't necessarily say it was termite damage.
Right.
You have to do some probing, see what kind of damage exists there. But I will identify those things. It's important to know that these are ancillary services that aren't covered in a general home inspection. So termites, things that we're going to go through here, radon inspections, on-site sewer inspections, which they call Title V in this state, are ancillary inspections you'd go through.
Right.
But certainly a home inspector is looking for any kind of structural damage, including termite damage, if it's visible.
Right.
Termite inspectors would do extensive probing because
Right.
the damage may not be apparent or visible.
Right, that's
The only
right.
way to tell is to be able to see it
Right.
and probe it. Can
Probe
look
it.
good,
Yep.
put your screwdriver or a
Right.
probing mechanism,
Right.
and it goes right through the material,
Yep.
and then
Right. Yeah.
those are an issue. So
That's
you're
right.
looking at various areas where you would typically see termite damage, generally closer to the ground.
Yeah. Right.
In older houses, more susceptible because they're built closer to the ground.
Right. Right. So, and this is one of them. Yeah.
And this is one of them,
Right,
again,
right,
more extensive termite damage
Right, right.
in that case.
Right.
In a finished basement, very difficult to determine if termites
Because everything is
exist.
hidden. Yeah.
Everything is hidden. So there's an issue there. They are developing technology in the near future, infrared scans that will be able to determine that. In the old days, they used to have trained beagle dogs that could sniff out live termites.
Right,
In a
right.
slab house where that you wouldn't be able to see it, or in a finished basement. There's no one in this area that has that now.
Right.
There are some companies that have trained beagles for bed bugs,
Right.
but none for termites that I know of.
Okay.
Uh,
So it's
the
kind of
last-
tricky. Yeah.
It can
yeah.
be very tricky, yeah.
Right. Right.
So sometimes it can involve invasive testing, opening up areas if you're suspicious
Right.
that termite damage may be there.
Yeah, yeah,
And we
right.
would recommend that. So
Yeah.
if we were suspicious or saw evidence of mud tubes or something, we would say, it's prudent to have that area opened up to see the extent of the damage and where they've traveled. So you can
I see.
make a more prudent
Yeah.
decision again.
And then we also have the septic tank.
That's a septic
Yep.
tank, yeah.
Right,
So
right.
on-site sewers, not so prevalent, certainly in the city areas, Quincy and these areas around here. And you get to more rural areas or other certain suburbs,
Right,
you have
right.
on-site sewer systems.
yep.
And they can cost you tens of thousands of dollars to replace. So
10 to 15 grand, right?
10 or 15 grand or 20 or 30,
Easily,
we've seen
yeah,
people
right.
spend 60, 80, $100,000 for a pump-up system in a big site.
Right.
So it's important to find out as much as you can.
Right.
Sellers are required to provide that Title V inspection.
Right. It has to be passed.
Has to pass or
Yeah.
fail. But like a home inspection,
Yeah.
people should be very clear about. Because it passes that Title V, or even a home inspection, say a home inspection doesn't not find major problems, doesn't mean they don't exist or latent deficiencies aren't going to occur.
Right, right.
So there's more that a person should be talking about Title V. How old is that system? Everything has an average life.
Right.
So if you're buying a house with a 25-year-old system, it's the original system, it's nearing or beyond its
Right.
average life. So age is very important to find out, not just the fact that it passed Title V.
Right. Right. Agree. So average septic tank would last about what 30 between 30 to 50 years, right?
It's
Roughly.
not the tank that fails. The
It's not
tank
the
doesn't
tank.
fail that. I mean, that's not the reason it's going to spend your life. It's the
Right.
leaching area that's going to
Oh,
clog.
okay.
So
I
septic
see.
systems are typically around 50,
50?
40% efficient.
Right. Right.
You cannot build an on-site sewer system in the state unless there's a reserve field. So it's not unusual in 20 years for a system to fail, even if it's properly maintained.
I
So
see.
that's why age is important too, besides the passing. So to rebuild a leaching field, you have to dig up the ground, put a new in, or seepage pits. The tank is one thing, or a distribution box that may feel relatively minor. To
I
do
see.
that, and old systems don't meet today's standards.
right,
Title V,
right.
4 feet above the high water table, those kinds of issues.
Right, right.
Pump-up systems can be very expensive,
Right. Right.
retaining walls and whatever. So that's important, not a part of the normal
Right,
home inspector's
right.
deal.
This is more specialized, So okay. And the next graphic is about radon gas.
Yes, radon testing. Various types of radon tests, these ones that look like hockey pucks, we call them hockey pucks. You have the little vials we call scintillation tubes.
Right,
And they're
right.
devices that contain charcoal.
Yep.
And you set them in place, usually in the lowest potential habitable area if there's a basement, even if it's not finished. And you leave them there generally for 48 hours or longer, a little bit
Yep.
longer.
Right. Right.
To test it. It absorbs all the gases, and they analyze the radon content. Radon is a significant health hazard.
It is. It is.
Second
yeah.
leading cause of cancer next to cigarettes.
So if anything above 4.0, then the seller has to install a mitigation system
Yes.
in the basement. And it
Doesn't
looks
have
like
to,
this.
but you'd want to negotiate for that if you were a buyer. I don't think there's anything to require him to do that.
I see.
On there. So that's a
Right.
typical mitigation system where you
Right.
see a fan. It's called sub-slab ventilation.
Right.
They put a pipe
Right.
in the ground that sucks the radon out of the ground.
Yep, yep.
If it was an older house that had stone foundation, the radon could be coming through the foundation or actually through the rock itself, because that's where it's
Yep.
often going.
That's right. Yeah.
So you'd have to maybe sometimes put heat exchangers. It's not generally a major deal-killing process. Could cost $1,200, $1,500 to mitigate. A little more if heat exchangers are required. So just because you have radon doesn't mean you shouldn't buy the property. Or anything else for that matter, if we ever get into that.
Anything can be fixed,
aspect.
right? I guess. Yeah.
It can be fixed, so if you're buying at the right price,
Right, right, that's right. And in terms of the inspection, so after the inspection has been completed, and then the report will be given to the buyers, what should the home inspection report include it, and how to read it? Those are that's important to know.
it's
Yeah.
real important to know.
Yeah.
In my company, we don't do inspections unless our client can be there. If they don't value the time to get to an inspection, we simply don't think they're the appropriate client for us. So we insist that they be there with us. Unless they're a past client, they're out of the country or something, we may see something. So it's critical that that buyer be there to see the problems. Again, see
to
what you
hear.
can inspect,
Yep.
see what you can inspect,
Right.
see and hear it.
Yeah, that's right.
Because getting a written report, even with photographs, is not near as good as being there. Because you can be misled by the written word, even the photographs.
Yep, that's right.
So by being there, you will clearly understand most of the written report. It's rare that I get a call from a client on there. If they weren't there should be a lot of calls. I would think there would be a lot of questions. So important to be there, and they will understand the report. There are various types of reports, from simple checklists to checklists with comments to narratives. So it depends. Today there's a lot of software. Most inspectors use software. So you can get a good looking report. Doesn't mean it's representative of the property, though. It can look real good, and all of this word is canned language. So you want to be careful. To read the report, read the whole report, make sure is consistent with what you went over with your inspector. So read that report. However, there are some reports that might be 80 or 100 pages. Maybe you're not going to spend the time.
Right.
So it depends what you want to get out of it.
Yeah.
But they should lead that. Any questions, of course, call the home inspector.
Yeah,
If there are
right,
questions
right.
regarding the report.
Yeah, so it is important to be there, to listen, to hear, and also ask questions as well.
You bet.
Yeah.
Ask questions.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And I always told the buyers that no questions are dumb questions. Anything you don't know, ask, because you want to familiar with the condition of the property and any major issues, from the home inspection, because the fixes can add up, if you will. So that's important to ask questions and to know about the condition or any major issues with the property. And now, during home inspection, when deficiencies are discovered, how do you address that? Do you address those questions yourself, or would you recommend the buyer to consult a specialist or a professional, if you will, to provide estimates or to give them advice in terms of what need to be corrected?
Again, very important point. First of all, I think the home inspector's job, besides finding obvious and apparent deficiencies, we talked a little bit about hidden and latent deficiencies. People have basements, there's stuff stored up. There may be a big bulge or a crack in the wall.
Right.
Unless
Yeah.
a home inspector or anyone else can see it and it's apparent at the time, you're not going to be able to call it out.
Right.
But it's a part of the home inspector's job to put it in perspective. There are many deficiencies we expect in most houses. As a matter of fact, in the 35 years I've been doing it and done close to 10,000 inspections, I've never found a perfect house. Whether it be a $20,000 house for a major athlete or executive that might cost tens of millions of dollars, or it's a modest little house. All houses have problems. Humans build them. No one's perfect.
Right.
In general, older houses have more problems, kind of like people,
Right.
health issues. So the older property you're going to buy, the more problems generally it's going to have due to age and breakdown and how they built things 100 years ago.
Right.
Compared to today, the new technology. People often say they don't build them like they used to, and in most cases they build them much better today in terms of safety and everything else. The workmanship and quality of carpentry may not always be there,
Right.
but the whole process, the structure, the mechanical, electrical systems, everything about a new house is generally much more satisfactory than in older houses. That's a generality in there. So an inspector has to put things in perspective. You see a little crack in a plaster wall in the corner of a door of a window due to shrinkage of wood or something, you know, we don't want to say, geez, there's serious structural issues here, major settlement, you know, the house is going to fall down, you need a structural engineer. As opposed to, we might see a chimney pipe that's all corroded out and there's a big hole in it and carbon monoxide is coming into the house and people can, their life safety can be threatened, including the occupant. So it's a part of the home inspector's job to put things in perspective. If they are serious and life-threatening, you've got to tell that buyer in no uncertain terms. Those are the issues. If they're minor, you say that. The home inspector, again, doesn't always know the scope. But if he knows it's a serious life-threatening issue, we feel there's a moral obligation too. If we see a life-threatening situation, we will tell, if the homeowners aren't there, we'll tell the agents, the listing agents, to please tell the home owners that this might be a serious issue, as well as our clients. Our reports, as you well know, being in the business, are confidential reports for our clients exclusively. We cannot share them with anyone else, except if we see a life-threatening situation. We have a moral obligation. We ask our clients, do you mind if I share it? And of course they don't. On those kinds of issues. So putting things in perspective is important to everyone involved in the process. And in terms of what they're going to cost, which is another part of your question and all that, we don't know. It's against the law for home inspectors to cite cost to cure because we don't know the extent. We're not experts. Again, we're generalists. So there's no human in the world that's an expert in everything we inspect. And for people to start citing that, even though they're trying to be helpful to everyone, they may not get it right. So a home inspector may say, oh, geez, we all agree the roof is worn out, it needs to be replaced, and it's going to be $50,000. When it might be 8 or 10, now they might have killed a deal unnecessarily for everyone gets hurt in that process. Or sometimes they might say that roof is $1,000 when it might be 8 or 10. Now the buyer's expecting to spend $1,000 and finds out it's a lot more money.
That's right.
So even though they may try to be helpful, they don't always know that, so and that's why it's against the law for them to do that. And that includes the how to cure things. Those are experts. They're going to look into those issues in much greater detail than a home inspector is.
So that's why it is important to get factual information instead of presumed information, if you will.
And why you get experts. So if we see major issues, we're going to recommend the major people look at a structural engineer, plumber, heating guy, electrician, you know, knob and tube wiring, those kinds of issues in old houses that can be serious, and a lot of serious issues. So.
That's right. So it makes sense. So with an average home inspection, because I know that each inspection is different. Sometimes you have to inspect a single-family home or a multi-family home or a commercial property. For let's say just a simple range, if you will, for a single-family home, how long would it take for you to perform a home inspection versus a multi-family or a commercial property?
So another good question, and that's kind of you should ask that. If anyone's screening a home inspector, how long are they going to spend? That'll give you a good feel for that. So I've been doing, I told you, 35 years. That's a long time in the business. I'm a long-term veteran in this business. I know most of the people in the business, and I know what time they spend. I've been on the National Board of Directors for the American Society of Home Inspectors Regional Board, and I'm familiar with most of the good inspectors in North America for that reason. So a good inspector, generally in an average single-family house under 2,000 square feet, 1,600, is going to spend probably 2.5, maybe 3 hours on an average house. Bigger, older houses, longer amount of time. Certain multifamilies, bigger stuff. Anyone that's going to spend less than 2 hours at a typical property, single-family house, probably is not going to be as thorough as you might want them. A small condo, certainly you could spend a couple of hours or maybe less in there, because it's not all that involved. You're not necessarily doing everything around there.
I see.
So I would say 2 to 3 hours, but 2.5, 3 hours would be
that's minimal. That's minimal, right? Okay, So that makes sense. Because based on my experience, that most inspectors. If they want to perform a thorough inspection, they usually spend about 2.5 hours, maybe sometimes more. It depends on what kind of issues that they might find in the home. So Yeah, so that's correct.
Let me just add one
Sure,
thing
please,
too. that
please. Yeah.
Not only the issues you find, but you know in the business, we might have clients that have lots and lots of questions. And they may
That's right.
ask the same thing over and
Yeah,
over
yeah,
again.
yeah.
So you can add another 15, 20 minutes, half
Right.
hour or more,
Right.
just because they're very inquisitive.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. You said no question is stupid. We agree with that philosophy.
right,
We
right.
encourage them to ask questions,
right.
just to do it in a more efficient sequence. We don't want
Right.
to ask them questions about electrical when we're talking structure, because it can throw up the whole process.
That's right. Yep.
So-
Make sure everyone is on the same page, right? Yeah, in terms of questions wise.
Yeah.
So, and so when it comes to deletting, I mean, why deletting is important?
Okay. And I don't purport to be any kind of a lead
Right.
inspector. I don't do lead inspections at
Right.
all, so I'm not a lead expert at all. We
Yeah.
would always recommend if they had lead. I think, and I'll show you, 76, 78, they banned lead, so properties after that generally don't have it. Though people could get a hold of lead. You can even get lead paint today. It's used for boats and things of that nature. So it is available, and there may be lead paint left in some people's basement, but they've
Right,
used it.
right.
I think a lot of the properties in Massachusetts, from what I understand, have been de-leaded, but not all of them. So if you have children, young children
Under
especially,
6, right? Yep.
under 6
Right, yeah.
especially, you would definitely want a lead inspection, because there
Right.
could be poison their brain,
Yeah,
that kind of thing,
right,
affect health
right,
issues.
right.
And we always tell our clients, we get clients that are sick of looking at houses, all right? They've gone through the process, they've been looking for months and sometimes years. And they're willing to accept anything. You know, tell them there's your brother. And that may be great, but when they go to sell that house, other people may not be that accepted of that condition. So that holds true with lead paint and everything. You may think it's okay, or you may be willing to accept this, but if you had to sell a house in an emergency or any other reason, you know, you've got to be aware that it's going to affect resale value too as well. And certainly that's true on lead paint.
I see. So, and the last question is that what is UFI?
UFI is urea formaldehyde foam insulation. And again, the state has stopped. I think they don't even, for the last 5 years, I don't think they have anyone in the department. They used to have a woman that was in charge of that. And I think there's pretty much no UFI left in the state. Most houses, according to the state documents anyway.
Right.
So it was an insulation that was extremely good in terms of its U value and ability to conserve heat and things of that nature. But a very small percentage of those things weren't put in right, and they would leach formaldehyde. Formaldehyde, as probably most people are aware, is again a carcinogenic and affect health. So even if there's UFI there, it's my understanding, it's been outgassed. So even if UFI exists, but it could affect resale value too. So
I see, yeah.
that's something you want. And that's usually invisible. It's inside the cavity of exterior walls.
Right, right.
Once, rarely, I think I've seen 2 houses in 35 years where I might see it in an attic. We'd see it as foam. We wouldn't know it's UFI until you tested it.
Right,
That's
right.
like asbestos, we'd call them suspect. Like
Right.
mold, we'd
Yep.
say suspect mold if it looks
Right,
like.
right.
It requires extensive laboratory testing and things of that nature, expert testing.
Okay.
So UFI is something generally people aren't going to be too worried about, but it never hurts to ask.
That's right. Yeah.
You can probably tell me, they used to have a UFI disclosure. I don't think they use that anymore in real estate, do they?
They do actually.
They do, okay,
Yeah.
so they still do that. So that's
Yeah.
probably a good
I
thing.
mean, I guess the state should remove it, you know, because what are the chances, basically, right? So maybe a small, percentage for that to happen. So, but it is what it is. You know, I think eventually it's going to change, but who knows when? So,
Right.
But with that being said, I want to thank you for sharing and thank you for being here. You have done a very good job in sharing your expertise with the viewers. And thank you. So, before entering signing the purchase and sale, it is important to have a home inspector to inspect the property, and also to be familiar with the condition of the property as well. Now, home inspection will give you the peace of mind, including knowing the condition of the roof, structural integrity, condition of the plumbing, electrical, and heating system, just to name a few. Because at the end of the day, your home might be your largest investment. I want to thank you for being part of the show. Hope to see you next time.
Pleasure, Calvin.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.